When you think of Los Angeles, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Sunshine? Movies? Traffic? That's what most people would say. But I really think about the river. I think of the wildlife and biology that used to flourish throughout our great city. I think of the fish, the native fish like the steelhead trout that used to enjoy the LA River. In recent years, there's been a new focus on revitalizing the river, but often the key element for that is forgotten: the fish. Is it possible that native fish can find their way back to the river? Will we welcome them back? Native fish in the LA River, particularly the steelhead trout, began to dwindle just about 100 years ago. For several million years before that, the trout would swim back and forth from the salty Pacific Ocean up the river to the cold, fresh water in the San Gabriel Mountains to spawn a new generation. But as the human population exploded, people crowded in on the river, and then occasionally, floods came. Without any concern for fish and wildlife, dams were built, and the river was lined with concrete channels. There wasn't any room for fish anymore. As a result, native fish disappeared, and the prime species, the Southern Steelhead, is endangered today. But now, guided by scientists, restoration design engineers, nonprofits, and governmental agencies, the LA River Fish Passage and Habitat Program is studying how to bring native fish back to life right in downtown Los Angeles, a 4.8-mile stretch of the river from the Elysian Valley to Washington Boulevard. Can the barren concrete channel be modified to restore stream habitat and bring back fish? The experts are studying flow, habitat, barriers, water quality, and all the elements necessary to let the river live again. A flourishing, more natural stream zone and a path to the upper river tributaries like the Arroyo Seco and Tujunga Canyon can help create a more sustainable river and enrich us and future generations. It's a big dream. It could be the key test of the LA River restoration efforts. Please contact us to be informed of our progress and learn how you can get involved.
Hi, I'm Tim Brick, and I'm the managing director of the Arroyo Seco Foundation. We have a great show for you tonight. It's really a very appropriate Earth Day show because the theme of Earth Day this year is restore our Earth. And so we're saying restore the Arroyo Seco. And what better way to restore the Arroyo Seco than to bring back the native fish that have belonged here in the Arroyo Seco. We wanted to start with that video to give you a sense of a very exciting project that's going on in downtown Los Angeles, right at the confluence of the Arroyo Seco and the Los Angeles River, in order to restore the fish, the steelhead trout in downtown Los Angeles. In Pasadena, the steelhead have a very venerable tradition. They've been here literally for millions of years. And yet recently, some people have been saying that, in fact, the arroyo doesn't have fish in it at this time. Well, they're dead wrong, and we're going to prove them. We're going to prove that tonight. As soon as when people came here, indigenous people venerated the native trout. And when the European settlers came in this area and began settling Pasadena and the area around it, the native fish, the trout, the steelhead were a very important part of their life. Charles Holder, the great sportsman, who was a hunter and a fisherman, established many of the principles of ethical sports fishing. And he was one of the co-founders of the Tournament of Roses, actually wrote about the fish in a delightful book that he wrote in 1898 called All About Pasadena. And in it, he described the Arroyo Seco, saying, to the west of Pasadena extends the cañon of the Arroyo Seco, which means literally a dry river. In the summer, there is in the bed a little stream, which now and then disappears, really forming a great body of water, though out of sight. And in the winter, after a rain, bearing in its torrentious channel a rushing torrent of great power, the drainage of the great cañon of the Arroyo that extends a third of the way across the Sierra Madre Range. The Sierra Madre Range, for us old timers, is also known as the San Gabriel Mountains today. He goes on to say, in and among the trees along the Arroyo, a trail has been worn, often leading down to the bed of the brook. And here one can wander for hours at Christmas time in this leafy retreat with the birds singing all about and trout darting from the horses' feet. What a delightful image. Later, Lloyd Austin, who was the proprietor of the Switzer's camp at the top of the Arroyo, a wonderful place that I hope many of you have visited, he said in a talk in 1936 to the Pasadena Historical Society, at a distance, Arroyo Seco may be only soft Spanish for dry gulch. But from the first day of the Pasadena colony, every hunter or fisherman who ventured beyond the granite gateway a mile above Devil's Gate brought back tantalizing stories of trout pools, foaming cascades, and groves of live oaks, sycamore, and spruce, hemmed in by imposing cliff walls. One morning, 3 anglers reported a catch of 240 trout below the site of the ranger station. An amazing scene. Now, since then, of course, Devil's Gate Dam came in 1920. The channelization of the Arroyo Seco stream, almost the entire part of the urban stretch, occurred in the 30s, and the conditions became very difficult, even impossible for the steelhead to make their passage from the San Gabriel Mountains out to the Pacific Ocean and back again. In recent years, conditions for the native trout that have remained in the mountains, who are cousins of the steelhead, in fact, they're steelhead who just haven't reached saltwater yet. Those trout, however, have had extremely difficult conditions since 2009 and the station fire. Of course, following the station fire, there was a flood in the next 2 years, and then there was a very long drought that extended from 2011 to 2017. And again, this year it's extremely dry. And so some people have said that there's no trout in the Arroyo. Occasionally, I've run across people who've told me, who've assured me that, yes, indeed, I saw trout recently. I saw trout the other day, but it has been very occasionally. And when Pasadena, as part of their Arroyo Seco Canyon project, went to do their environmental impact report, they sent someone out on one of the driest days of the year in October of 2019, and they looked from the stream and they couldn't find any trout. Well, indeed, there are trout there, and we're going to prove that to you right now. I'm going to introduce now our next speaker, who has been a trout scout, a very prominent Pasadena resident, an attorney, and the chairman of the Planning Commission in Pasadena. And it's Steve Olivas, and he can tell you his story in finding trout in the Arroyo Seco. There we go.
Good evening. Good evening,
Welcome,
everyone.
Steve. So glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for the introduction. And it's been great being a part of the Arroyo Seco Foundation, the work that you're doing. Really appreciate it, Tim and Angel, who I've gotten to go on a couple of trout scouts with. Yeah, I've been going up in that area for decades. I used to go and fish in the early 2000s. And I'd go sort of outside of Switzer and hike pretty far back into the canyon there. And back then, trout were plentiful. I mean, and it wasn't just the numbers. these were full-bodied, healthy, beautiful rainbow trout. And so I was pretty, I was pretty bummed, like I think the rest of us, in 2009 when the station fire came around, and have been coming up for years and years, looking and scouting and just looking for something, hoping to see something. And there's been some pretty dry years, and really hadn't seen anything, and sort of hooked up with Tim and sort of suggested a couple of places that I should look. And I made it my mission to start all the way down sort of by the casting pond there below the big bridge on Colorado, and literally walk all the way up the stream to the dam, past Devil's Gate to, is it Brown Mountain Dam, Tim?
Yes.
Correct. And so I did that loop. Prior to that, Angel and I had walked from Switzer all the way sort of back to where I used to fish prior to 2009. So I'll go back to that. But I was able to, I guess a week and a half ago, Sunday, to actually see and catch a trout for the first time in, I guess, what is it, 12 years, 13 years. And it was gorgeous. It was full-bodied, beautiful trout. I released very healthily. I was out of the, had it out of the water for long enough to take a picture in my hand. And I think there's a picture of it. It's one of the ones there on the screen. And you can imagine the feeling I had when I experienced that. It was amazing. I hadn't had that experience in over a decade, and it confirmed that sure enough there are trout in the Arroyo Seco, and I thought it was important because you, just like Tim, you hear folks say, "No, I think I saw something," or "something darted," et cetera, et cetera. I wanted to take a picture of it and make sure that it was evidence that yes, in fact, they do exist. The area I did find this trout was between Gould Mesa and the dam, and there's some decent pockets there. There's some nice pocket pools, some riffles, and I found one of these. I found it in one of those. I honestly saw no other trout that day. But because I found one, I decided to keep at it, and then spent some more time sort of between the Forest Service homes above JPL and Gould Mesa, and was able to find another trout. In fact, I saw a couple of others that I'm certain were also trout, smaller trout, on that same scout. So I'm really excited about this. I think it debunks a lot of the theories out there. The water is pretty tiny between the Forest Service homes and Gould Mesa, and so my sense is that they've existed in this sort of, with this water levels, that they could be plentiful again. I mean, it's going back to the scout that Angel and I did above Switzer. That water was prime. I thought for sure we would see several. Every pool we went to, I thought, oh, we're gonna see one. We're gonna see something. There's some several feet large pools that are 20 feet wide, and we hiked off trail for a while along the Arroyo, and again just I thought the conditions frankly there were far better than where I actually saw them between between the Forest Service home and the dam. So very excited. For me, it's an amazing experience. I live here in Pasadena. This is 15 minutes from my house, which is which is just, I think, phenomenal when you think about that. This is such a treasure that we have here. It's really the crown jewel, in my opinion, of Pasadena, and I support every effort to restore it, and to ensure that there's adequate water flow and the ability for trout to go up and down the arroyo. So as I told Tim, I'm actually heading up with my father tomorrow for opening day in the Eastern Sierras. We have a 40-year tradition, so I'm pretty excited about that. I'm not going to be able to stay on, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, that's great, Steve. Thanks so much. And I wanted to start by asking about that painting right behind you. That looks like a great painting of the Colorado Street Bridge. Who did that one?
Yeah, this is a painting by my late grandmother.
Oh, really?
And she was an artist, and she loved to paint the bridge. And in fact, that's sort of right below it is where I started, hiking up the river to look for trout. And I'll have to give a shout out. My hat is a painting by my niece, who, if I could, just sort of give a shout out, who was just accepted to UCLA, and she wants to be an environmental scientist. So hopefully she'll be continuing some of this work. Oh,
that's terrific. Hey, if anybody's got a question, Steve has to leave, but he's ready to answer a couple of questions. John Tobin from the Pasadena Casting Club asked me, he says, your Ha Amungna post called the recent trout discovery a steelhead. Well, that was stretching it a little bit, John. It's a future steelhead. It'd be a steelhead if it could get out to the Pacific Ocean. That's the thing. So we are going to begin a program in which we're going to actually do genetic testing of some of the fish in the upper arroyo, and we're going to do a thorough analysis of all of the conditions for fish, particularly for rainbow trout and steelhead in the Arroyo Seco system as part of a steelhead recovery program that we're hoping to pursue with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So if anyone has any questions, if you put something in the chat box, Steve's available to answer your question for a few minutes. Well, Steve Huntley asks, how can we become a trout scout? Well, sign up with Angel. Angel's going to be speaking later. Yeah. Angel's going to deal with that a little bit later. Perhaps I should go over the program just a bit while we're waiting for if you have some questions for Steve. But we do have Tomlinson is going to come, and he's the one who wrote the book on steelhead in Southern California. That's going to be a terrific presentation coming up next. And then after that, Wendy Katagi, who's working on that LA Fish Passage program in downtown Los Angeles, is going to be speaking. And following that, Angel Pinedo, our education director, is going to be doing a presentation on the fish of the Arroyo Seco. So we've got some other good stuff coming up. If anybody has any questions for Steve, this is the time. Will there be a time to hike out and find trout? Yeah, well, Angel's going to deal with that more specifically later.
I got a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Steve, are you a fly fisherman?
Yes, I do both. Yep.
Yeah, great. Notice what the bug life was up in the canyon?
I didn't. It wasn't. There wasn't a ton of activity. The days I was there, I was kind of there on off hours. It's difficult to fit in. I just had to fit in my schedule. But yeah, there seemed to be some activity. I bet if I would have gone later in the evening,
Angel was up there.
Everything is right for it.
Yeah, Angel was up there on Sunday. Angel's going to be speaking in a few minutes, and he was up there on Sunday, and he was telling me how abundant the bug life was in the upper watershed. I mean, further up even than Steve was. That is beyond Brown Mountain Dam up there in the upper Arroyo Seco.
That's good to hear.
All right. Yeah, of course, the bugs are a really great indication of how healthy the stream is, as well as the habitat. And so those are the kinds of things we're going to be looking at our watershed assessment of the Arroyo Seco. Okay.
Hey, Tim. Richard Laziski. I was wondering, didn't Fish and Game stock the upper Arroyo years ago?
Indeed, they did. They used to stock it with hatchery fish from afar, and they stopped about 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that we're going to be looking for is the fish up there. What's the genetics? Are they really the local rainbow trout, Where did they come in from a hatchery? Are they remnants from the hatchery from 30 years ago or something like that? Or what is the true genetics of it? So that's one of the puzzles that needs to be solved.
So would you
But
do that with the Fish and Game and do electroshocking?
We're
That's
going to
how
do it
they-
with Fish and Game. We're going to use a variety of tools, including snorkeling and netting and perhaps with Fish and Game, there would be some electro fishing as well. So
That would be a quick way to find out a section.
okay. Well, we want to move on now to Tom Tomlinson. Thanks so much, Steve. That was really terrific. And we just, it's so inspiring to
everyone.
actually see the fish that you caught. I mean, that you caught and released, I got to say. And that's one thing, of course, we want everyone to really respect the fish very much. And, we don't want people, in any way doing anything that might, harm the fish or, add to the adverse conditions that are already up there. So, all right, some closing words, Steve?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. It was, just want to say the thrill of that experience is, was amazing. I hope to see all of you on the water. I look forward to the work we're all doing together. So thank you all for joining us.
All right. And thank you so much, Steve. And now we have John Tomlinson, who is a veteran fisherman and has worked with cow trout in the past and used to be associated with USC. And he wrote the book on steelhead in Southern California called Against the Currents. And so we have some slides that we're going to show, but let's let Tom introduce himself and say a few words here before we move on to his slides.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Steve. Nice to meet you. I'm an historian by training, USC, not UCLA. And the book grew out of an interest that the Aquarium of the Pacific had to create a steelhead exhibit, which they did. And they wanted somebody who knew something or claimed to know something about what I'll call the sociology of fly fishing and trout fishing in the San Gabriel Mountains and greater Southern California. And that was me, and it still is. It was a great adventure, which yielded up the book that so this is, by my reckoning, the most famous image of a LA River steelhead recorded. It was given to me in 1991 by Charles Hogue Jr. And the marginalia up at the top reports that it was caught, and I don't know what it means by caught, because it was the 1st of January of 1940. And depending on which rules and regs I read, that's out of season. Was the fish stranded? Did he wade down to the river and pull it out? In any case, it's a 24-inch fish. And if anyone ever had any concerns about, I wonder if the fish were really as large and plentiful as folks like us claim, there it is. That was January 1st, 1940. The next picture, please. Appeared in March of 1940. Mr. Gray Fox there was on a work release assignment from LA jail, and he waded down to the river and pulled this baby up. It was estimated to be somewhere around 4.5 pounds. Again, March of 1940. And a year later, March of 1941, a headline on the front page of the LA Times, not that one, read as follows: pity the poor fish in the LA River, exclamation mark. Steelhead swimming upstream may find themselves stranded. And the urgency of that statement will fall upon you here. 2 short paragraphs I'll read. How to save large schools of steelhead trout that are coming in from the ocean and running up the Los Angeles and San Gabriel rivers to spawn, facing certain destruction if the stage of water in the streams falls suddenly, is a problem now bothering county fish and game officials. The fish this year are apparently in greater numbers than usual because of the recent long spell of rain, and they could very well have been referring to the previous 3 years here. You all are mindful of the enormous floods of 1938, resulting in the high stage of swift running water in the 2 rivers, San Gabriel River, LA River. According to Spence Turner, the chief county fish and game warden, quote, "We may have to call upon the state fish and game department, which has fish tank rescue trucks," Turner declared yesterday following a conference with the chief engineer of the county flood control district. If the water falls suddenly, before the fish can get back to the sea, thousands of them will be left stranded on sandbars or in pools where they will perish. With the use of rescue trucks, thousands can be saved and reservoirs put into reservoirs where they will be saved and can do some good. So in 3 years, even after the LA River was being channelized, you have this enormous interest that they would appear in photograph and in article. This ought to underscore your point, Tim, that certainly, if not 24-plus-inch fish are racing up and down the LA River and the Arroyo Seco, they were at one time. Of course, that article, as well as the gray fox image, indicates how dependent these animals were on great flooding. The flood was the freeway to reproduction and, in many cases, but not all, it's an eccentric fish, a return to the ocean. They are seen in the ocean now and again, estimates, and maybe Wendy can confirm this or clarify it, of the number of fish, Southern California steelhead, that may be swimming about in our coast is perhaps no greater than 600 that survive out there. And they have the capacity, given the right water conditions, to be able to oblige nature's mandate to head on upstream and spawn again. Tim referred to, as did the brief film, talk about the challenges of concrete, if you will, posed by concrete, whether it's the channelization or whether it's the multiple dams that began in earnest building with the dam up there on the Arroyo Seco in 1921. The notion was get the water out of the foothills and out of the streams as fast as possible. Why? In part because the growth of Los Angeles in specific and Southern California in general was so rapid. The population since 1860, when there was hardly anyone there, to be sure, but doubled every decade. So that by the year 1900, you have 100,000 people living in Los Angeles. By 1910, there are 300,000 people, and so on. So a brief remark about the fish itself. We're interested, of course, in the detail the niche area, if you will, of the range of this magnificent fish, as Charles Holder once dubbed it. It is the Pacific Ocean fish, which was first identified off the coast of Kamchatka, Russia, in 1790 something, and is indigenous to the entire arc of the Pacific Ocean, all the way down into Baja California. The person who spoke most elegantly and most frequently and gives credence to any claim, I think it's a somewhat of an overstatement, but virtually of many claims to the fecundity of the Arroyo Seco was none other than our pal Charles Frederick Holder, who is in many ways the poster child for the growth of Pasadena. He might be the patron saint of the restoration of steelhead in the Arroyo Seco. He had all of the boxes checked. He came out here around 1885 for all the reasons so many people were and continue to come out here. He had lousy health, pulmonary disease, TB, and he was giving life one more chance out here. And like so many, he continued to live another 30 years in his case. So that credence moved him into a world of great action and creation. He came from the Naval Academy, but opted not to go into the Navy. He spent 5 years as a curator at the American Museum of Natural History, so he knew something about the science and biology of animals. In Southern California, he was involved with the Trout Academy, now Caltech, of course. And it occurred to me the other day, what a nice circle this is, where this sort of anchor industry now at the trail there on the Arroyo Seco is JPL, which is managed by, among other places, Caltech. He was a founder of the Tuna Club in Catalina. He was a booster of the Rose Parade, and he thought an arena along the lines of the Pasadena Rose Bowl would be a terrific idea. But what he did for us was to write in 1906, A Life in the Open, which was celebrating his life as a hunter and especially as a very knowledgeable fisherman. He knew saltwater fish, he knew freshwater fish. And that book, and now the next image, please. Yeah, this is a 1900 photograph, a popular card, which I found in the Pasadena Historical Society, of a man you can barely see in the center, exact center of the photo, standing in front of his tent, camping on the Arroyo Seco, which probably looks not too much different from some of the waters that Steve described. He talked knowledgeably about the drought, flood experience. He also talked about rainbow trout being plentiful in the course of the stream. He talked knowledgeably about what it would take to catch steelhead, and he told of his reputable, he claimed, friend who hooked a steelhead that would have gone 14 pounds he estimated, and after a tussle, the steelheads headed back to the ocean. And Frederick Holder himself confronted a very, very large steelhead, which he couldn't attract to the fly, couldn't attract to the worm, but finally succeeded by hooking a tree toad onto his line. And with that, the fish took it. And the last thing he saw was a fish bountifully carouseling downstream. We've all heard that from fishermen. We're geniuses at causing life to grow even after it's out of its environment. But I choose to believe him as a knowledgeable resource here. He also spoke, and now the next picture. This is the chapter in which he waxes eloquent about walking up and down the Arroyo Seco. He's knowledgeable about the flora and the fauna. He adores being there. And he reveals himself as a naturalist. We might even call him now an environmentalist, seeking to preserve all of that. He's much more than a fisherman. He's much more than a hunter. He gets the big picture and why it was important. He was, next one, please. Here are two views of the Arroyo Seco that he knows and that we might have known. The top is a plein air painting done sometime around 1910 by William Judson of the Judson School of Art, which used to be USC School of Art at the turn of the last century. It's in May, so the stream is barely discernible there. But a 1938 photograph of the Arroyo Seco captures what must have been a paradise, excuse me, for steelhead. You can see in the upper left-hand corner, there is the Museum of Native Persons now that Charles Loomis spearheaded to create. Next photo, please. Here are three images from the San Gabriel River, which Frederick Holder knew also quite well. He fished it along its entire stretch. And here's a 1908 image on the upper left of a 4-pound trout. The one on the right, hard to believe, that's a 9-pound, 3-ounce trout. And the fisherman, Mr. Thompson, fishing around 1910, is reported to have caught another 5 fish that weighed over 5 pounds each. And the bottom one there, May of 1909, was a fish billed as Southern California record steelhead trout. All of these affirm and the presence of these magnificent creatures in the Los Angeles River watershed and the San Gabriel River watershed. Next image, please. And here's one that I enjoy very much. This happens to be a postcard which was printed around 1916, 1917. In fact, it's based on a photograph that appeared in the Los Angeles Times sporting section circa 1915, 1916. And the caption there was identifying the name of the fisherman, I've long since forgot it, but that he was just about to net a steelhead. I believe it to be on the East Fork of the San Gabriel River, but that's only a hunch. I think that's plenty for now, and happy to field questions now or later.
So what's going to bring him back?
What's going to bring it back? Well, a resoluteness on the part of all of the stakeholders, whoever they may be, to make the case for why these animals are important to our balance of nature, how we treat them once they're back as a fishery, or shall we set up bleachers, which I sort of fantasize is a good idea. I'll sell the beer, the wine, the single malt scotch, and my books. And watch them go upstream and watch them head downstream. It's, we, as people did the Suez Canal, as people, we channelized the Los Angeles River and countless other streams and rivers. This should be easy by comparison.
Thanks, Tom. Let's hold for some questions later. We have a couple more presentations coming up, and we'll have some questions after that so that people can participate in the discussion as well. And now we're going to move ahead to Wendy. Wendy, are you here?
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Wendy. How are you? So nice to
Good,
see
thank you. Good
Wendy
evening.
is the genius with Stillwater Sciences that really is pushing the LA Fish Passage program in downtown LA. She's also helping us on the restoration, developing a recovery program for steelhead in the San Gabriel Mountains. She's worked very closely with the Arroyo Seco Foundation, actually 15 years ago doing the Central Arroyo Stream Restoration Program, in which we brought back Arroyo chub to the Arroyo Seco stream. And now she's working with us on our campaign to develop a program for steelhead recovery in the San Gabriel Mountains and in the Arroyo Seco itself. So Wendy, please tell us more about the LA Fish Passage program and also your work in the San Gabriel Mountains.
Oh dear. There you go. Minimize this. All right, so thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to share a little bit of our story here, working with the Arroyo Seco Foundation, the Friends of the LA River, Council for Watershed Health, and the Mayor's Office, and a group of agencies really focused on steelhead recovery in this watershed, funded by the State of California Wildlife Conservation Board. This project started in January of last year, and we are working very quickly to get a design that is implementable by the end of this year, so that we can get through our regulatory compliance and onto construction as soon as possible after that. So this is the LA River Fish Passage story in terms of the first pilot project, about 5 miles of the LA River through downtown, connecting to the Arroyo Seco confluence and also the soft bottom Glendale Narrows. If you want to learn more about the project, there's a whole GIS story map on the Council for Watershed Health site, and that's located on the watershedhealth.org site. And it includes a lot of this history on the project, as well as what we've accomplished in terms of the science, the engineering, and looking watershed-wide on recovery items. So this map is showing the 5 mile reach, approximately 5 miles, the upstream boundary being the transition from the concrete line channel just above the Arroyo Seco to the soft bottom reach, and extends down to the Washington Boulevard Bridge currently. The idea is pretty simple. We're trying to deepen and slow velocities during migration periods. This is a migration corridor for steelhead through the city of Los Angeles. It's a leadership opportunity for all of us so that we can pull concrete out of the channel and create habitat, fish passage in this very urban setting, so that in other portions of both the Arroyo Seco channel and lower LA River, similar types of treatments could occur. The important thing to note also is the project with the Mayor's Office working with the Army Corps is all about implementation of the larger ecosystem restoration project that has been approved through congressional authorization. The science, we did what we typically do, which is a limiting factors analysis for steelhead watershed-wide, a conceptual ecological model that really looks at life history, threats, stressors, characteristics of the watershed, and how to improve our ecological understanding, learning from nature, and guiding the restoration design priorities. This figure is showing the estuary or the mouth of the river at the Pacific Ocean, and the upper tribs, which we all know, Arroyo Seco, Tujunga, and the Rio Hondo going up towards the San Gabriel River. So I'll just really quickly, because I know there's other speakers, 6 days on average to reach the Arroyo Seco based on typical adult migration speeds. Limiting factors, as you know, there is a Devil's Gate Dam, there's Brown Mountain Dam, and at the same time, with all of these limiting factors, there's tremendous spawning and rearing habitat in the tribs, Arroyo Seco. This is showing a lot of the work that we're trying to do with the Army Corps on naturalization, and then basically, there's all these different opportunities with storm drains and biodiversity connectivity corridors. So we're looking at that too. Currently, as you can see, the channel completely concrete, the depth too shallow, velocity too fast for the fish. So they just slide right back down. Current width is 20 feet, depth 0.5 to 1.5 feet. Here's a concept showing the steelhead. And so basically it would be using the existing low flow channel invert, creating opportunities for vegetation, for cobble, gravel, you know, what you would typically see in a trout stream, right through the concrete line channel. So because of flood, there's a lot of restrictions to protect property. So we needed to work with the existing hydraulics and hydrology to basically model and design this fish passage, which we intend to make more like a meander and, you know, maximize opportunities for things like aquatic plants and wetlands and things that would improve the health and water quality of the river. And then just to wrap up, we're also working with the Arroyo Seco Foundation and others on as many opportunities to pull funding together. And one of the main things we want to do is work on stream assessments in the upper watershed, targeting barriers like Brown Mountain Dam and sediment, so that we understand anything that would be a limiting factor to reestablishing a resident trout population, a healthy one, in the upper watershed that is sustainable. And then other opportunities will follow, working with the county on Devil's Gate Dam. I won't go into all of that, but basically, as part of the recovery plan with NMFS, National Marine Fisheries Service, there's all kinds of important actions that need to happen for flows and protection of multiple species. And the steelhead is really the cornerstone. So we're so excited about all of this work with all of you, really, because this is our, you know, this is our watershed, this is our community, and these are our resources. So I'll pause there. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so
questions?
much. Could we hold the questions for a little bit later? We have
Sure.
we have coming up Angel, Pinedo, who is the education director of the Arroyo Seco Foundation, and he's going to give he's going to tell us some about the fish of the Arroyo Seco, including the steelhead, but the other fish as well that were part of the natural fish in the LA River system. So, Angel, where are you?
I'm right here.
Oh, there we go. Thanks very much.
We can hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Happy Earth Day, everyone. Thank you for coming and joining us on this special talk about preserving and restoring a natural resource that's this beautiful animal that's part of our biological and cultural heritage. So thank you for staying tuned as well. And we'll talk about the trout scuts at the very end of this presentation. So give me a moment. Okay. Okay. Is this full screen for you, the presentation? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So once again, my name is Angel Pinedo. I am the Education Director for the Arroyo Seco Foundation. There are other fish as well that are native to and historically native to the Arroyo Seco, not just the steelhead, and I'll be going just a quick survey of the other fish, particularly that are native and that we are concerned about and that we hope to find as well. One is probably the most misunderstood and maybe not the most loved just by the way its appearance, but that's the Pacific lamprey. They are currently under particular focus with California Department of Fish and Wildlife right now, and our current proposal had to include a mention in detail how we want to preserve them as well. They are anadromous. They do migrate. Interesting note is that their young bury themselves in the sediment for about 4 to 6 years before they actually migrate to sea. And apparently they were very tasty. So if you can't find anything else to enjoy them or find love for them, maybe that's the one detail we can hold on to. The arroyo chub, this is a species of special concern. A lot of our native fish are species of special concern or threatened or endangered. One is the arroyo chub. This spawns in spring. It is native to many of the rivers in Southern California. It is adapted to summer heat, and there are some populations that have replaced the Mojave chub. The Arroyo Seco Foundation years ago did restore a small population below Devil's Gate Dam and near the Rose Bowl. It was recently surveyed by the Southwest Resource Management Association in 2020, last year, in the Arroyo Seco. So it is there and it's still around. The Anna-speckled dace, this is at risk for extinction within 50 years. It is at critical status right now within only 6 populations remaining. A lot of this risk and critical status is due to water diversion, pollution, and of course, urban development. The Santa Ana sucker is federally threatened. It is found only in a few rivers. It rarely reaches 6 inches. You can tell that it gets its name by the little snout that it has, that it can suck food from. Its size might be due to survival in the summer months. Keep it small so it doesn't have to eat too much. It can survive very well in low water levels, even lower oxygen. The unarmored 3-spined stickleback is federally endangered. It's called unarmored because other members of its species have what looks like plates, whereas this one doesn't have them, so thus the name unarmored. It is supposedly very popular with aquarium enthusiasts despite its endangered status. Something very cute about it is that the males have adopt a parental role with their young. They build a nest for the eggs, whereas also the females choose their mates, and the males continue to care for their young until the young leave. So something really adorable with fish. We don't always think about things like that with fish, so it's nice to see it. And now, of course, our special fish of the hour is the steelhead trout. And what is the steelhead trout? It is a rainbow trout. They are so genetically similar. It is specifically a coastal rainbow trout. It is a subspecies of the rainbow trout. It is anadromous, and for those who don't know what that means that it's able to change form depending on its life history. If it is a migrant, it starts off as a rainbow trout, and when it migrates to the sea, it becomes the steelhead. It slowly gets its silver color and then gains a lot of weight and becomes a lot bigger, as you can see in that nice photo there. If it stays within the freshwater river system, it's just a resident and stays that way. Both steelhead and rainbow trout can give birth to either or. It's that similar. What's under investigation is what triggers those genetic expressions of what makes what. Stream environment is very important for steelhead and rainbow trout, particularly falling insects. We had someone mention earlier in the audience if we saw any insects in the stream. I was there this last Sunday with some of our trout scouts, and there was definitely a lot of insects in the water, particularly mosquito. And those of us who know, mosquitoes have their larvae in the water, and that is some good eating for our fish. So that's definitely important to see that. They also consume other insect larvae on the bottom of the stream. They really need gravel beds for their eggs and for their fry, and they will defend feeding territories to do that. The evolutionary history of trout, they have been around for millions of years. Pacific trout likely originated in the Miocene about 6 million years ago. We do have fossils that have occupied the Pacific drainages that date back to a genetic ancestor 33 to 56 million years ago. So it has quite the history there. Steelhead trout in the past, and I won't go too much into this because it's been brought up by our other speakers as well. Dams are landlocked when it comes to it. It removes water flow, necessary water, particularly in the summer months. And I've read different accounts of this, and I'm not sure. It depends on the researcher or scientist or the specialist. But I've heard different accounts of whether or not hatchery stock breed or not with native fish. I'm not sure on that one. The historical population is supposedly was within the tens of thousands. Currently, there is less than 1,000 individuals of steelhead trout. There was a study done that predicted that there is the possible extinction of the trout within 50 to 100 years. Climate change in trout particularly can be very troublesome, but it also adds a different complicated scenario as well. As the waters warm in California and particularly in our rivers, it may benefit the rainbow trout at first because it will affect their metabolism and they can store fat. However, there may come a time when, as these waters warm, their energy demand will overexceed that adaptation, and it may switch. And it turns out that maybe it might favor steelhead in the future. However, despite that adaptation to perhaps possibly doing better during climate change, it doesn't reduce the threat caused by water diversions, particularly with our current issue with the Arroyo Seco Canyon project. That seeks to divert more water from the Arroyo Seco, particularly even during the summer months when it is most necessary, particularly for our rainbow trout and steelhead. Steelhead migration, this once was a thriving area for steelhead trout. The photo we see here was Devil's Gate Dam before the dam was built, and you can see what looks like the devil head formation in the horns right there. They would go from the San Gabriel Mountains to the Arroyo Seco, to the LA River, into the ocean, and return back. And unlike salmon who die off after they spawn, steelhead can survive year after year. Real quickly on the dam nation of California, that's a little pun. There are currently 116 dams that block major flow in California. They flood the landscapes. They gives a lack of flow of water, and it also favors lake type areas that favor invasive species. So let me talk quickly about the citizen science, our citizen science project, and the Trout Scouts. This is something that I'm leading volunteers out, and whoever wants to come, we could use your expertise if you're a fisherman. I'm not a fisherman. I'm trained as a teacher and as an educator. So you can teach us things that we could use to help restore and monitor the rainbow trout in our area. When the most common one will be the stream bank observation. Here we have Steve Olivas in a photo of him taking the temperature of the water as well. Equipment, this is simple: polarized glasses, pen, pencil, GPS coordinates, and the rest of it. This is a photo of the rainbow trout that Steve caught in the Arroyo area. This is pretty much what it is. I'll guide you when it comes to all these things as well. Perhaps the most important method that we need to do is underwater observations. If you have snorkel gear, by all means, we may have to share gear, just in case. Of course, snorkel gear, because of COVID restrictions, we'll keep that just to you, and as you will use that. We'd love for us to get into the water and look for them. We follow the guidelines based off California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Salmonid Restoration Manual, and they suggest stream bank observations, though are nice, you need to get in the water and look in the crevices. We will also look into electrofishing and see how that can be done. It looks, at least according to the manual, it doesn't seem to be required to be a licensed person who does that, so we'll look more, investigate into that further. Other than that, it's just about getting in the water and looking in those crevices because they'll hear you coming. And so we need to find their hiding spots and we're looking to monitor them. This is just an example of the data sheet that we'll be using as well. So if you'd like to get involved and help out with our program, by all means, you can email me at angel@arroyoseco.org. Our next scouting trip is actually this Sunday. If you can make it, we're planning to be there in the morning, and I'll give you more details about it at 7 a.m. We're planning for about a 4-hour day, and we're hoping just to comb an area from Gold Mesa up to Paul Little, and maybe the next time we'll do even more detailed combing of other areas. If you're interested, again, angel@arroyoseco.org. Thank you.
Great job, Angel. Thank you so much. Now's the time for questions. If we could do it through the chat function, I think that would be best. So if you have a question, could you enter it into the chat and we'll try to respond to it. And how about we'll bring forward all of the presenters. So Tom Tomlinson is still here, I hope. Are you here, Tom? Maybe he's not here. Oh, there he is.
Here.
Okay. And Wendy as well. So if you have a question for any of the presenters or just a question in general, please go ahead and we'll try to field the questions. So let's see. John and Sabine Sherman ask, hi, John Sherman. We need you to write a song about the steelhead. Can we count on that, John?
We already have one.
It's ready.
You have one? All right.
Yeah, one.
I like that.
Not tonight.
I don't know if you know what great performers these two are, but I love so much your song about the among the hawk. You know, that's it's really totally inspiring. So anyway, your question was, I'm sorry, it skipped past me here.
The question was what is the optimal, what is the optimal flow rate for the steelhead as well as the optimal temperature for the Southern California steelhead? Question for Wendy, I think.
Yeah, Wendy's been looking at that carefully.
Right. So in our Southern California streams, we've seen and taken temperature readings in the Trabuco Creek system where the temperatures were as high as around 73 to 75 degrees. So that's very warm for a cold water fish, but they were fine. So they've adapted in our Southern California systems to warmer temperatures. Migratory velocities really do vary. So it depends on the swimming ability of the fish, but typically we're trying to get, you know, they travel as fast as, okay. I was going to say 6 feet per second, but that's not quite right. There's burst speeds, run speeds, and just kind of holding. So it really varies, but in general, they're very fast swimmers. And probably the best thing would be for me to just direct you to that website so that you can see the full spectrum of speeds for the different size fishes.
Actually, my question was about the water flow rate. What would be the optimal water flow rate?
Okay, so if it's in your Arroyo Seco, in the headwaters, the flows, you know, 3 to 10 CFS is probably a normal stream flow. But during migratory periods, the flows can go up to 600 CFS. So they're very opportunistic swimmers.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, it depends on where they are in the system.
Yeah, and one of the things that's important about the Arroyo Seco stream is that it tends to have, from some studies anyway, the coldest water on the LA River system because of the rapid rise in elevation. The elevation of the Arroyo Seco at the confluence is about 400 feet above sea level. And in lower Pasadena, it's more like 600 feet. And up by Devil's Gate Dam, it's 1,000. But it rises very quickly up to 6,400 in 12 miles up at the top there near Strawberry Peak. So that rapid rise in elevation, you know, tends to, the fish like it. as well as it promotes a colder temperature as well. So and that's one of the things about the southern steelhead that's so significant. This is an endangered species, and it has the ability to adapt to dry conditions. So it's important among all of the salmonid species, 31 salmonid species in California, I believe. This is the one that is most adapted to dry conditions. So that's a very important part of it. All right, the next question is, let's see. There was a question about the cost of removing Brown Mountain Dam. Well, that's a good one. You know, dam removal is obviously very important. The Brown Mountain Dam, for those of you who know it, blocks totally the whole upper Arroyo stream, about 3.2 miles above the mouth of the canyon. And so it blocks it for fish and wildlife of every sort, aquatic species, but also for people. There is a switchback trail around Brown Mountain Dam, but that's a project that's going to have to be approached very carefully. And it's a 1942 dam. We think that there are seismic and structural issues that need to be looked at very carefully. And we're working with the Forest Service to begin a preliminary engineering and biological analysis of the impacts of Brown Mountain Dam in order to begin the process of considering what to do about it. Is there some way to modify it so that it can accommodate fish and other species? Or is it necessary to remove the dam for the future sustainability of the Arroyo Seco stream? That's a question that needs to be studied very carefully and addressed. We think we know the answer, but we need to be objective about how we proceed. Daryl Kunatomi says he was on the East Fork of the San Gabriel River last Saturday and Sunday. Several problems with any future for steelhead or other trout, native fish. Yeah, well, the East Fork is very different. You know, there was the Bobcat fire last fall had a heavy impact on the San Gabriel River. And as a matter of fact, California Department of Fish and Wildlife has done some recovery rescue projects in the post-fire period, and have actually placed some native trout in the Arroyo Seco that have come from the West Fork of the San Gabriel River. For those of you who know the geography there, the Arroyo Seco is right next to the West Fork of the San Gabriel River. If you cross the ridge there at Red Box, you go from the Arroyo Seco into the San Gabriel River watershed there. So it's really right next door. So the San Gabriel River, and on the other side, Tonga Wash, is the same way, has native trout in it. We have some more messages here. Let's see. Fire affected the West Fork. Yes. Left the East untouched. Okay. All right. Let's see, what else do we have here in terms of questions? We have someone raised the point about they were concerned about people fishing in the Arroyo Seco. Fishing is kind of a, would any of you like to respond to that, Wendy or Angel, or how about you, Daryl? Would you like to say something? We'll let you in there. You have to unmute on your side, I believe.
Yeah, I actually wrote for the LA Times outdoor section when we covered outdoors, and interestingly, my dad grew up swimming in the LA River back when it was a river, so I've had a long connection to that darn thing. I'm a local fisherman, fly fisherman. I fished the Arroyo, I fished Santa Anita, Piru Creek, Cattle Canyon, the East Fork, West Fork, North, all of them. Every line on a map I could find, I would scout and fish. There's a huge human impact on our local streams, absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And when I heard about this, I was very excited about it, and very glad to hear the effort being put in and the initiatives being taken. And I'm willing to help in a second. But I'm up there every weekend, and it's a tough situation. People are making dams, they're dropping their trash wherever. Last week, I carried out 40 pounds and left a lot more, including a full-on barbecue somebody left on the stream. And then there's the water thing. If we don't have winter storms, we have almost nothing. One last thing I'll mention real quick is please encourage people not to stack rocks. It totally alters the stream. And if you guys ever go to any of our streams and lift a rock and look at the bottom, you're going to see caddisflies, mayflies, maybe stoneflies, and maybe Diptera larvae, the black things that bite you. If you stack those things up, you're killing the food base of an entire ecosystem. So please encourage people not to stack rocks. So
Thanks very much, Daryl.
I'll help you as much as I can. Thank you very much.
Those are very key comments that you offered, and we really do. We want to encourage everyone to be very sensitive to the environment and not exploit it, really. And it's particularly important because there's already so many human impacts on the stream from the dams and the debris structures and all the little check dams and all of the things that clog the stream up in the mountains. But there's, the human impact is enormous. And I think particularly on the East Fork of the San Gabriel River is where you see the most intense kind of impacts on the system. In the Arroyo Seco, there's actually been, in the COVID period, there's actually been an increase, I think, in people going up and using it. And a lot of them are newbies who aren't really familiar with the kind of etiquette that should exist with regard to leave no trace and, do not, interfere with the habitat and nature. And so to start, with the question about fishing, I don't think anybody's really fishing in the Arroyo Seco at this time. People are scouting, looking for fish. And, we feel very pleased that we've been able to spot some fish recently. We want to do a total survey of the fish in the Arroyo Seco, but certainly to think of it as a commercial or a recreational sports fishery, it's not that. And it's not likely to be that in the foreseeable future, no matter what happens. There's going to be dramatic changes that come from nature in the next 100 years. A lot of it's probably going to have to do with climate change. And there's a lot of serious questions about the future sustainability. And but if we can help this endangered species survive, that will be a very wonderful legacy for us to provide for future generations. And that's the way we need to think of it, instead of, going back to Charles Holder, he was one of the original apostles of catch and release and of ethical standards of fishing, sports fishing as well. And, the more advanced fishermen all are very ethical about how they approach this kind of situation. I think what we really need to worry about are the uninitiated and the people that haven't been trained to respect nature. So that's part of our educational function, is to educate those people so that they respect the stream and respect the critters, including the fish. So, all right, we had some other questions came up here. Let's see if we can deal with them. All right, so some of the questions have been answered through the chat. Let's see. Are there options for fish passage through Devil's Gate Dam since it's unlikely to be removed? Actually, Devil's Gate Dam is an interesting dam. It was the first of the county's dams developed in 1920, so it's 101 years old now. And it was really the block for steelhead going up into the arroyo. You saw the pictures of steelhead down near the confluence of the Arroyo Seco and the LA River in 1940. But really, after 1920, they couldn't get up into the mountains in our area because of Devil's Gate Dam. However, there is a 13-foot tunnel that goes through Devil's Gate Dam. I think there may be possibilities of doing some adaptation or modification of Devil's Gate Dam that actually would allow for fish passage during high flows, which would be a wonderful thing to do. So right now we're focusing on Brown Mountain Dam, which is further north and totally blocks the stream. But we do want to take a look as well at Devil's Gate Dam and what can be done about Devil's Gate Dam. I'm actually more hopeful the Devil's Gate Dam could somehow be modified or adapted to accommodate fish moving through the area. I'm very wary of that prospect for Brown Mountain Dam. All right, another question. Jack Smith says the Forest Service is not known for speed. We're getting good cooperation from the Forest Service. We're pleased that the people at the Gateway District and the Angeles National Forest are cooperating at this point, and we're beginning an assessment. And they are focusing on Brown Mountain Dam, which is, after all, their dam. They built it in 1942, and they're cooperating with us in the preliminary study that we hope to undertake soon with regard to that dam. All right, let's see, who else? Pet peeve with rock stacking. Parker Davis doesn't like rock stacking, especially in streams. Is there a timeline of removing just the concrete bottom, not sides of the LA River? Wendy, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, so as part of this project that I was just talking about, the 5 miles, we are removing concrete as part of this design and engineering pilot project and installing habitat structures. So the timeline, the phase that we're in is design and engineering. Next year is the regulatory approvals, and the year after that would be the start of construction. But there's another effort going on just, you know, in the Arroyo Seco channel, and Tim can speak to that, but the Army Corps' feasibility study alternatives involved removing concrete from the Arroyo Seco.
Well, the big study that we're moving on now is really developing a steelhead recovery program for the Upper Mountain watershed, beginning really at the JPL Bridge there and going up for the 12 miles that go up into the Upper Mountain watershed. We've been working with the Corps of Engineers and the County of Los Angeles and the communities of, you know, Pasadena, La Cañada, Flint Ridge, South Pasadena, and Northeast Los Angeles on Arroyo Seco planning for 20 years, really, and the Corps of Engineers has been involved in that. The County of Los Angeles is now moving forward and wants to expedite that program and advance the planning with regard to restoration on the Arroyo Seco. And I think there's an awareness on the part of the county and the Corps, both that the Arroyo Seco, even in the urban areas, is ripe for stream restoration and for enhancing the habitat for fish and native species. So we want to do whatever we can to maximize that for now and for future generations. Jeff Neff mentions fish ladders, that they're in use in other parts of the state. And, you know, that is a tool that will be looked at in the future. Some sort of way of getting fish through tough conditions will certainly be looked at. All right. Daryl, would you like to further your comments on your catch and release program on West Fork and Piru Creek?
Yeah, just for everybody's information, there are 2 areas that are reserved for catch and release fishing in Southern California, and that's the West Fork of the San Gabriel River and the upper part of Piru Creek, which is the water that flows right out of Pyramid Lake and Pyramid Dam. They're both great fisheries, and over the past couple of years, the fishing's been really good for fish maybe 6 to 12 inches. But the curve fire, or the bobcat fire rather, really took out the West Fork, and it's going to take a long time to recover. Piru's gone up and down. It all depends on the water they release. But the point I made about that long post, guys, is the policing of a waterway is virtually non-existent in Southern California. So you can have a great place, but it's going to get violated unless you can somehow get the Forest Service or National Park Service or whomever to at least check people, walk around, make a presence known so it gets out on social media. And that's another two-headed monster. You know, the great waterfalls, the best waterfalls in Southern California. Here's how you get there. Here's the GPS coordinates. They're no more secret places. They're the famous hot springs on Deep Creek. They've been overrun. And so protection is going to be so critical. I can't express that enough because I'm up there picking up trash all the time. And I wish I could carry up a sandblaster to take the paint off of rocks. People are taking rocks and trees. So again, guys, there's going to have to be some kind of encouragement to get some enforcement.
Well, you're absolutely right, Daryl. Thank you so much for raising that point. It's absolutely critical. And part of that means supporting the Forest Service in their funding appropriations and things like that. The Forest Service has been really heavily impacted by all of these fires and has turned into a firefighting organization and is not able to take care of a lot of the caretaking functions that they provided in the past. So we really need to address that fact that the changing climate and particularly the fires have created a situation now where we need to have a better way of stewarding the forest and of providing support for it. So the Forest Service is really stretched awfully thin, and it's easy to criticize them for not providing the services, but there's such a burden of public use and abuse that they're dealing with that I think it's important for us to build support for, expanded educational and stewardship services coming from the Forest Service. All right. Well, we're approaching an hour and a half. We kind of want to limit the conversation at this point. I hope that everyone will stay in touch. I hope those of you who are interested in supporting this program will help us out. And, helping with the surveys of the various conditions that are in the Upper Mountain watershed are very important. We're going to be doing barrier surveys, looking at all of the barriers to fish passage. We're going to be looking at invasive species and mapping invasive species and mapping good habitat and where the ponds and pools are that there's likely to be fish. So we want to do a comprehensive survey also of the human interventions and the negative impacts that they've had on the conditions for fish and wildlife. So there's a lot of work that you can do as a citizen scientist, and we hope that you'll get in touch with Angel at arroyoseco.org if you'd like to help with that. We're also going to need just public support in general for you to be telling your friends and community groups about this, as well as to be helping with the funding that's necessary in order to do the education that will be involved with this long-term program in order to bring steelhead back to the upper Arroyo Seco. So thank you for joining us this evening. It's really wonderful that you've spent this time with us here on Earth Day, and I hope that you'll keep that message in mind that really Earth Day should be every day, and that we need to engage in long-term campaigns in order to create a more sustainable and resilient future for future generations. Thanks very much for joining us this evening.